Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. Michigan season. It's starting in a couple of weeks, and that's when that transfer portal period opens up. I think the position that we're all going to be talking about as Michigan fans is at the quarterback spot. Now, I will make note that it is kind of contingent on what goes on with the Bryce Underwood saga. I mean, dude, I'm living and dying with a 17-year-old's Instagram stories going up late Thursday night. I think that regardless of us getting Bryce Underwood, I do still think Michigan will be a player in the transfer portal market for a quarterback. I think Bryce Underwood being on the team or not kind of depends on what quality of quarterback that comes to Michigan. Now, let's start with this. We're going to go off the assumption that we don't get Bryce Underwood and we are looking to get a difference maker at the quarterback spot in the transfer portal. Dill, I got 7 names. Now, these 7 names might not all go into the transfer portal, but I do think all of these names have a chance to go. And it gives us kind of an opportunity to talk about what kind of quarterback that we want leading this Michigan offense in 2025. Fired up to get into it now. Before we do, and as always, the Michigan fans, y'all, a lot of y'all have been rocking with the boys through some highs over the last 12 months and some real lows. Appreciate you guys. It's about to get real over the next couple of weeks. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, any quarterbacks that you would like to see potentially come to Michigan that we don't talk about. I got 7 names. Dill, let's start with USC quarterback Miller Moss, who I think will go to the transfer portal, and I think Michigan will be interested in Miller Moss. 1 to 10, how excited would you be to come to Ann Arbor?
Probably about a 4. And I guess the fundamental issue is I don't know that he's perfectly built to thrive in what Michigan's going to have next year. Because you look, Miller Moss is a guy who I think needs everything around him to be working. And when it is, I think you've seen really good plays. So I wouldn't be disappointed necessarily to see him. I just look, Michigan's probably got a lot of work to do in terms of building the talent out in the wide receiver room, building the talent out back up in the offensive line room, which certainly, again, you think both those spots are going to be better, but are they going to have a USC receiver room next year? I kind of doubt it because USC's receiver room is great. And I just don't know that he thrives in what Michigan's doing. I think you need a little bit more of a dynamic skill set. Kind of frankly, what I think we were hoping to get out of Alex Orji, but just also with the ability to throw. I just think Michigan probably is going to need a quarterback who can be a bit more of a difference maker and make some things happen. And Miller Moss just really isn't.
That's the knock on Miller Moss is he's not exactly a playmaker. You know, Jim Harbaugh used to say J.J. McCarthy can make wine out of water. Miller Moss is not that guy. I do think Miller Moss can thrive in an offense that gives him a run game and that gives him pass protection. Because when Miller Moss has struggled, that's when that USC offense, and Michigan fans know, we kind of saw firsthand that USC offensive line going up against some dudes on the defensive line, it struggles. I'm probably a little higher on Miller Moss. I'll probably give it a 6. Again, the knock on Miller Moss is you talk about creating, you talk about being a difference maker, a playmaker, a quarterback that can elevate an offense, like what Cam Ward's doing at Miami. That's probably not Miller Moss. But if you give him a good run game and you give him a clean pocket, I do think he can be a very successful quarterback. And the arm talent, I think, gets a little underrated. This guy was a former top 100 national prospect coming out of high school, 43% completion percentage, 20-plus yards down the field. I think if Michigan can get the pieces around Miller Moss, I think this offense can be really good with Miller Moss at the helm in 2025. Dill, next quarterback, I think this is probably going to be the guy you're most excited about. Let's talk about John Mateer at Washington State. Now, I'll put my hand up first and say I don't watch a ton of Washington State football, but I spent the last couple hours going back and watching some Washington State stuff. Dill, this kid's kind of electric. And I don't know if he's the passer that Miller Moss is, but he's not a bad passer. You look at the numbers, 62% completion percentage, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. This kid's electric with his legs, though. I mean, over 700 yards rushing, 44 missed tackles forced. That is more than any Michigan running back has, period, throughout the 2024 season. Dill, John Mateer at Washington State, 1 to 10. How excited would you see to see him in Ann Arbor?
I'd probably give you a 7, and the reason it's probably not, frankly, a little bit higher is I'm not sure the age is exactly what I think Michigan's looking for. There's part of me as a Michigan fan that almost wants a bit more of a stopgap rather than a guy who, again, I'll have 2 years, and he's not going to the NFL. He won't leave after his junior year. So again, that's probably my only question is like at this point, I would like to see Michigan be able to get more of a high school recruiting pipeline of what they have at the quarterback spot and start developing it up that way. So John Mateer's age, I don't think is necessarily super ideal for Michigan, but he's almost exactly what I think they'll need next year. Because again, I don't know that they're going to be able to flip everything around and have the pieces to have a guy like a Garrett Nussmeier or a Miller Moss to be really successful.
I will push back on you with the age. I actually think this is the ideal age where it's like, all right, this is a guy that has started. He's started the whole year for Washington State, who's a top 25 team in the country, like playing very good football. He gives you 2 years of eligibility, and I don't hate that because I think you can rock with the transfer, whoever that might be, for 2 years in 2025 and in 2026. Come 2027, you got a year 3 Jaden Davis, and you got a year 2 Brady Hart. And at the end of the day, one of those two quarterbacks is going to be ready to take over the reins. So I actually don't hate going with a little bit of a younger quarterback because it kind of gives you time to get Jaden Davis and Brady Hart right for the next couple of years. So
yeah, I guess the question is do you chase that type of player out when you go on the younger side? That to me is probably the only question. So it would open up like, ooh, I don't know if I was Jaden Davis, so I'd love them bringing in a guy who's just a year older.
You probably wouldn't chase Brady Hart out, but you probably would potentially chase Jaden Davis out. That's probably a conversation Sherrone Moore has to have with Jaden Davis. I think that's fair. Dill, talk about Garrett Nussmeier. I do think this is a possibility, right? Look at Bryce Underwood. If he doesn't come to Michigan, he's going to LSU. Garrett Nussmeier hasn't exactly put himself in a draftable position over the last couple of weeks, although I think Garrett Nussmeier can play at a very high level. This is a guy that 3-4 weeks ago we were talking about as a potential first-round pick in the NFL draft. I think you fast forward to right now and say, I don't know how high he's going to get drafted. Is he looking to play one more year, collect some NIL money, then enter his name into the NFL draft, something we've seen a lot of quarterbacks do? With NIL, like you're getting these fringe NFL caliber quarterbacks to come back for another season. Although I think he might not be coming back to LSU with Bryce Underwood coming in. And so Garrett Nussmeier, 1 to 10. How are we feeling about him?
I'll go 7 too. I actually would love Garrett Nussmeier, and I think he has more playmaking ability, frankly, than Miller Moss. I think there is much more upside, much more talent than Miller Moss. Like his best, I feel like, is a little bit better than Miller Moss.
Yeah.
And I think again, a guy who I think can also attract some high-level wide receivers, some high-level talent, some guys like a Jamal Banks who's at Nebraska now, a guy who is going to look for his last year to go make something happen, get ready for the draft. I think with Garrett Nussmeier, I think he can bring that type of player in. And again, I do think he's not a guy who's totally reliant on perfection around him. I think you've seen some good playmaking ability this year. He's not perfect. He's not John Mateer in terms of his playmaking ability for sure. But I like the age. I like the fit. And I do like that he does give you a little bit more upside, frankly, than a guy like Miller Moss in my mind.
I think he gives you so much upside. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier, you'll watch some Garrett Nussmeier football and say that's a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. This kid's arm talent's insane. I mean, over 20 big-time throws on the year. I would like Garrett Nussmeier a lot. I mean, he might, if he does, and there's a very good chance that he just goes to the NFL draft, but if he's available, I think that'd be a great fit for Michigan. Next one I want to talk about, Noah Fifita at Arizona. This is a name I fully expect to enter the transfer portal, right? I think we all expected him to enter the transfer portal after last year, decided to stay at Arizona, didn't have the year that we all thought he would. I'm not out on Noah Fifita. Dill, I thought Arizona was – I don't get it right all the time. I kind of got Arizona right. Like outside of Noah Fifita and T-Mac, like that team's not very good. And so he did not really have a ton around him outside of a very good wide receiver to make it work, struggle with the new coaching staff. You talk about arm talent, playmaking ability, the ability to elevate players around you, which we saw all of 2023. You go back to the 2023 year, Dill, a 72% completion percentage, 2,800 yards, 25 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions, gets outside the pocket extremely well, can extend plays, hard to sack. This kid, to me, checks off a lot of boxes. And to kind of talk about the age, I mean, he'll be draft eligible. So if he comes to Michigan, has a solid year, he's probably going to the NFL draft, and then you can kind of lean into Jaden Davis or Brady Hart in 2026.
Yeah, this one would be a slam dunk for me. I think I'd probably put that
like
eight or nine. And you look, especially the fact that he's killed it at the Power 5 level. I know it was the old Pac-12, but he was ripping it up last year.
Oh,
And
yeah.
again, he was a guy who wasn't necessarily in the perfect situation. It's not like Arizona was punching above their weight. I do think I'd like to see Michigan be able to bring in a quarterback who can elevate that offense and let them punch above their weight a little bit, as Michigan probably, or frankly, hopefully, builds a little bit more of a pipeline than what they had under Jim Harbaugh in terms of like that offensive talent.
I think that you're so right about Noah Fifita being an elevator. I mean, you look at Miller Moss, probably not an elevator. Garrett Nussmeier, maybe. John Mateer, maybe. I
Right.
think Noah Fifita is. What'd you say?
I'd say like Garrett Nussmeier is a fringe elevator. I think
Yeah.
again, there's high level talent, but I look like Noah Fifita proved it for pretty much a whole year at Arizona in a Power Five conference, punching above his weight. And again, John Mateer is kind of doing that right now, but
Yep.
Washington State's kind of the big dog of what they're kind of operating with in that sort of hybrid Mountain
Yeah,
West
that
thing.
with John Mateer, you're having the conversation about he's essentially jumping up from the group of five to the P5 or Power Four level now. Noah Fifita has shown that he can be an elevator at the Power Four level. Next one I want to talk about, and a guy that Michigan was going after out of high school has had a really impressive freshman year deal, Mike Van Buren at Mississippi State. Did you just scoff?
No, this is a 10. This is an easy 10
Oh,
for me. I don't care about the age with a guy who, I mean, he is ripping it up at Mississippi State. I think he looks so good. I'm not sure it's super practical because I think he looks at what he's doing with Jeff Lebby. I imagine he's pretty comfortable with what's going on. So I'm not going to get my hopes up that he hits. But man, if he hits, like, yeah, I know it's kind of unfortunate with the Jaden Davis thing, but this dude, I mean, he's killing it at Mississippi State. And he's also like another guy who's, I mean, he doesn't have a ton of help when they go play at Tennessee. It's
well,
basically him versus that Tennessee team, and he's
that's
making
why I
it.
think he might hit the transfer portal because he's a guy that kind of didn't have a good senior year at St. Francis, and a lot of teams kind of backed off him when they were recruiting him during a senior year. Winds up at Mississippi State, balling out. And again, the numbers aren't crazy: 54% completion percentage, 1,400 yards. Mississippi State, that's the worst line of scrimmage. It's the worst team in the SEC by far. The only reason they're even being competitive in some of these football games is because of true freshman Michael Van Buren. He's in a horrible spot, has every reason in the world to not look very good, and he's done it. Dill, I'm kind of with you. And again, there's a relationship there. Like Michigan, he was that was a relationship with him coming out of high school. I'm kind of with you. I don't know if it'd be a 10 for me because yeah, it probably would be pretty dang close to a 10.
He's so good. He's just like unbelievable at football. Like that's
Yeah.
why I mean, we don't get. Feels like again, that's kind of a guy you can really win a lot of games with for a long
Kaidon
time.
Salter, Liberty, hit the transfer portal briefly last year, decided to come back to Liberty. Not a very good this year, not a very good year this year, but last year threw for over 2,800 yards, ran for over 1,000. Liberty runs the table, loses to Oregon in the bowl game. Has a year of eligibility left. What do you think about Kaidon Salter?
Not super high, probably like a 4. And again, I think like he gives you some of the ability you want, but you kind of question, frankly, Liberty under Hugh Freeze. And I know last year wasn't under Hugh Freeze, but a lot of the Hugh Freeze kind of disciples, if you will. Chad was a good coach, but like the fact that they kind of are putting this out here right now and what they're doing, I know it's all not all on the quarterback. But the quarterback certainly plays a role in how many
Yeah.
games teams are winning. I'm a little suspect of what's maybe going on.
He,
And frankly, I don't want to like I'm a little surprised he didn't leave last year, and I wonder if there's a bit more of a reason than maybe you were thinking there was.
Yeah, I
Because
would need to. I would need to like if he hits the transfer portal and Michigan was going after him. I would need to like go and hey, again, Liberty's not a team that I'm like booking out time
I
to go
haven't
watch.
watched like much Liberty right now, but you look like again, I think there's enough talent on that Liberty team right now that they probably
Yeah,
should be winning more games than
should not be losing to Kennesaw State. I'm with you on that. Last name. Oh, well, I got two other names. I have one that I didn't include. I'm gonna throw in at you at the end. The only guy that's actually in the transfer portal that we've talked about, Thomas Castellanos, still 1 to 10. What do you think?
probably like a 4. I wouldn't
Oh,
be in
that's
love
high.
with this.
Me
I
neither.
think that's a like I don't love the mid-year leaving. I think that's something coaches are going to have to take a look at. Because again, I don't necessarily blame him. I would have been surprised if he stayed at Boston College, but to leave right after getting benched in that manner,
That's weird.
it's like the
Yeah.
Sluka thing. Like I wouldn't go after Sluka if I was a college coach. It's just
Oh,
like
I should have
it's
included
too
Sluka.
suspect of but like it's too odd of a situation. I get like with the transfer portal and some of the new ways of doing things, I think like culture really matters and who you're bringing in. I think it's tough when you mid-year leave on your team and you're going to be the team to take them next. that to me, I'd have probably some reservations.
Yeah, from an optics standpoint, Michigan taking quarterback 2 at Boston College is not great. Now, what I will say about Thomas Castellanos is
The
he's an
skill set
exciting
maybe.
player. Yeah, that can. Well, dude, it's so tough to talk about skill set because I think we're going to see some significant changes in the leadership of this Michigan offense. So I don't even know what skill we might
that's
have to have
probably
this
true.
conversation when we potentially have a new
And
offensive
I'm also
coordinator.
not convinced you could really win Big Ten championships with Castellanos.
No,
I think he's a guy who
yeah,
on a team that's probably needs to again go punch way above their weight. He can make some plays, he can give some big dogs some problems like he did to
yes,
Missouri and some of these other games they've been in. But it's almost I don't want to call it gimmicky offense, but it's not offense. There's a reason not everyone runs the triple option like Army and Navy. I think it's hard to win that way. It's probably hard to win the way Boston College is winning with Thomas Castellanos consistently.
yeah.
So again, probably those things combined with the fact that there was a mid-year departure, I don't think I would expect Michigan to be making a hard push.
Jackson Arnold, last name. I probably should have included him, didn't. What do you got?
9.
You like it?
I would love Jackson Arnold. I think the fact that he fumbles the amount he does, I would find extraordinarily frustrating if he can't clean that up. But he's a real talent. I think Oklahoma really failed him in a strong way. I think Brent Venables failed him. I think they pulled the ripcord on him way too early. You look sorry he didn't score a zillion points on Tennessee. Tennessee's a far better team than
Well,
Oklahoma.
it's not even
Oklahoma
that,
has
dude. It's
nothing
just do
around
you
him
see the
else.
offensive line they're putting out in the SEC is a disaster.
That
So,
and frankly the skill position. So everything around him is brutal. I think
so bad.
again, you've seen some really good moments from him. I'd be really, really happy with him.
And I loved him out of high school down there in Texas. This kid's a baller that I think should definitely hit the transfer portal because I think Oklahoma did him so dirty. I would love Jackson Arnold too. And again, he's going to be a redshirt. Well, not a redshirt, a redshirt. So he's going to be a true junior next year. So he'd have 2 years of eligibility. I'm more of a 2-year eligibility guy than you, I think, because I think
if you have a skill set that I think translates to big time college football, I'm really comfortable with it. You look, Jackson Arnold, I think he's got the athleticism, some of the playmaking chops to elevate a team, but he's also a guy. If you put him in a really good offense, he can really make things happen. My question with a guy like John Mateer and why I maybe don't love the age is John Mateer a guy who does he have the ability to throw the ball the way you need to throw it if you're going to go compete for national championships? That to me, 62% completion percentage in that world is probably not as high as you'd want to see it. There's probably a reason he maybe wasn't the top tier coming out of high school. Does he have that
I
ability to just
disagree.
rip
I
it?
think he's kind of got an arm, and I think he's kind of on that right developmental arc. I think he's one of those guys that you're not getting, you're just gonna get the same version. And that's kind of a conversation you can have. You add Miller Moss, you kind of know what you're getting. You know what you're gonna get from Miller Moss. He's gonna be a redshirt senior next year. You get a guy like John Mateer. I think there's still that developmental arc that could take place. We'll probably have to
But he's
revisit
a guy. He's a guy. Would you want to see what he can do in more of a prototypical offense? Because that'd be my question about him, Castellanos, some of those guys who I think are running a very unique offense that works for teams that don't, frankly, have the talent to run.
That's kind of what I was
say,
saying is that we'd probably have to get. Sorry, I'm going to get grilled for interrupting you. I think that. Well, you were rambling a little bit on me. So
you can say what you're saying.
I'll close this out here. The boys are falling apart. I think this conversation will hint on what the deal is with Bryce Underwood, but just as importantly, who's coming in as the new OC? What offense do we want to run next year? You can talk about the game, what kind of skill set do you want in a quarterback? That's probably going to depend on what the next offensive coordinator for Michigan wants. And so we'll kind of see how that plays out. And then we'll see just what kind of quarterbacks hit the transfer portal. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.